The title of tonight's talk is Gardening Joy, Planting Seeds, Pulling Weeds. And gardening is in parentheses, so you could just say it's actually called Joy, Planting Seeds, Pulling Weeds. So I'll offer a few ideas about the topic and then some specific thoughts about a practice, a way in which we might work with this this idea of nurturing that which is wholesome and uprooting that which is not so wholesome. So in this season of expanding light and growth, where gardeners get ecstatic or go crazy, and I just want to pause there and say, is there anybody in the room who would fall into that category of crazy gardening? Okay, so the rest of you just bear with us. Hopefully you haven't lost your mind, your job, or your body with your hours in the dirt. You know you're in trouble when you walk into Lowe's to get a filter for the heat pump, and you walk out with 5 plants, a shovel, some seed packets. Hope springs eternal in this month of the year. So this idea of joy or happiness, and this idea that there is suffering. There is suffering in the world. There are seeds of suffering. There are seeds of happiness. Both exist, both grow. And how do we tend, again, to that which is wholesome and weed out the roots which tend to harm? I was thinking about this past weekend with the ripples that we experience moment to moment, the joys, the sorrows for humans all around the planet. People honoring Earth as the place where we all live, the celebration of the holy day in Christianity, Easter, and the painful loss of life in Sri Lanka. So how do such phenomena link with us, with our practice? How do we hold such moments of history? I also saw the first hummingbird this past week. Seems early. And we have a bluebird nest with 5 eggs in it. Maybe because of signs of spring, maybe because it was a holy day, maybe because of the linkages across spiritual traditions, maybe because we're all human. I'm reminded of the Book of Joy by Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama. And if you've read it or listened to it, even better, listen to it, you may know that this is the remarkable story of these 2 spiritual leaders who met 4 years ago this month, April, in Dharamsala, India, to celebrate the Dalai Lama's 80th birthday. And with them was a person who recorded their conversations. So these 2 men, these 2 venerated spiritual leaders, are old friends in both senses of that phrase. And they are, of course, from widely divergent cultures and traditions. And yet there is this sense of happiness, this sense of joy that permeates their being, that emanates from them. And they both acknowledge that there is suffering. In fact, the person who recorded their conversation says he witnessed tears frequently. But there was this sense of not being caught in that, of it there being a constant flow of acknowledging both suffering and joy. And even just I'm listening to the book on tape right now, and just hearing it, there's an experience of joy and resilience that comes through from these 2 leaders. They somehow know about how to create and recreate life every day in each moment. And they understand that happiness doesn't reside in fortune or fame, but in the human heart, the human mind. And I think what they do is they invite us to see that every day is a new opportunity to begin. Not just every day, but every moment. They might have said it like this: every day is our birthday. We can plant a seed of joy. We can uproot that which causes suffering. These words from the Buddha say it clearly. We are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make the world. We make the world with our thoughts. Speak or act with an impure mind, and trouble will follow you as the wheel follows the ox that draws the cart. We are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make the world. Speak or act with a pure mind, and happiness will follow you as your shadow, unshakable. We are what we think. What a powerful idea that we create our own reality. Is it true? Well, the Buddha's advice was always to see for yourself. You might for a moment just reflect upon your own understanding of mental processes that you were born with, conditioned by life, experiences. And notice too, like what the tendency is in terms of meeting your own conditioning, your own thoughts. And does the way in which you respond make a difference between perceptions of happiness or suffering, inside or outside yourself? So, of course, one of the things that this would require is that we become more cognizant of what thoughts are arising. What thoughts are arising moment to moment? Because the wisdom here is that we recognize what is that thought in terms of cultivating it or not. Is it beneficial? And so obviously one of the places we pay attention to this is in our practice, as we did tonight. We can notice in this stillness what's arising. Neuroscientists tell us that about half of our wakeful hours are spent ruminating. So this mental proliferation that goes on and on. So unless we pay attention to the mind, our unconscious tendencies, just tend to take over. We ruminate. And the rumination may keep going until a thought catches a thought. When we use a thought to catch a thought, it's like a movie director pulling the lens back from the set for a different perspective, a bigger perspective. We can then notice, what's arising? Thoughts, for sensations, feelings, emotions, pleasant, unpleasant. Sharon talked about that a few weeks ago. And when we are aware of our awareness, we've pulled that lens way back. Some would refer to it as meta-awareness, meta with one T, meaning beyond or on top of. It means that aware of our awareness, we now have an opportunity to have a sense of spaciousness and a possibility of responding a little bit differently than when we're in that ruminative, automatic kind of knee-jerk response to whatever's arising. David and I sat in on some talks by some neuroscientists last weekend down at Serenity Ridge, and one of the things we learned is that when meta-awareness occurs, it lights up 13 different neural networks in the brain. So the number of neurons in your brain don't change. They're set at birth, fortunately or unfortunately, but the synapses change. So again, some additional words from the Buddha. Whatever is skillful, leading to happiness and peace for you and others, should be pursued. Whatever is unskillful, leading to harm or suffering for you and others, should be recognized and abandoned. Sometimes we have an idea that, or a view that first we have to eradicate suffering by controlling the mind. So there's a sense of like, I've got to get rid of or rip out the anger or the hatred or the jealousy or the resentment or the irritation or the fear. What if, rather than first trying to control the mind, which does have a tendency to sprint off to the future or fritter away the past, what if instead we just stay with the body, with breathing? What if each time we realize that the mind is tangled up in stories or advancing the front line, planning an attack, or nursing a grievance, or repeating a regret, what if we just stop? And here I'm using STOP as an acronym for a 4-step process. The S, stop. You simply pause. The T for take a breath. Aware of the breath moving in, moving out. Opening, observing. What's true now in the body, in the mind? And proceeding. By stopping and consciously taking a breath and opening to what's here and observing with some curiosity, what is my experience now? Can I open to it? We have the possibility of proceeding in a non-reactive fashion. And I find it helpful to, with these 4 steps, to think of them perhaps as having these qualities. So in the stopping, it's not yanking the reins to come to a full stop. It's the pausing and relaxing. Pausing and relaxing. And in the taking of a breath, there's a releasing. In the opening, observing, there is a relinquishing, a letting go. And in proceed, there is a rejoining. So notice how none of these words, relax, release, relinquish, rejoin, none of them holds much stress or tension, nor do they build upon the story of me, my anger, my frustration, my fear, my whatever. So one of the things that these words or this way of seeing this process may do is to allow us to fall back into ourselves rather than making something bigger out of ourselves. So in some ways we are looking more at our conditioned nature and able to see really what our inherent nature is. And in doing this, we can notice the seeds of nourishment and those that cause suffering. So, for example, if you see anger, you could invite a seed of the opposite or inherent nature to come up, the seed of compassion. If you see stinginess, we might invite generosity or gratitude. If we see rigidity, we might invite acceptance or forgiveness. So maybe there's some notion with this way of looking at our experience that there can be an awareness of a kind of unbounded body, an unbounded mind. And then the question may be, can the body and the mind, in that relative stillness, in openness, teach us about some even greater spacious, luminous, warm quality of this being? These words are from Thich Nhat Hanh. He writes, according to the creation story in the biblical book of Genesis, God said, "Let there be light." I like to imagine that light replied, saying, "God, I have to wait for my twin brother darkness to be with me. I can't be there without the darkness." God asked, "Why do you need to wait? Darkness is there." Light answered, "In that case, then I am also already there." So this notion of what dwells together, suffering, happiness. Sometimes the essence of this practice has been described as acknowledging, yes, there's suffering and there is an end to suffering. How do we transform? How do we come back home to ourselves, make peace with our suffering, treating it tenderly and looking deeply at its roots? And how do we nourish happiness with some acknowledgement, some understanding, and some compassion for ourselves and for those around us? Stopping and taking a breath, opening and observing, proceeding. We can ease suffering, generate joy. And again from the Dhammapada, whoever recovers from doing evil by doing something wholesome illuminates the world like the moon set free from a cloud. So, if you would, reflect for a moment in your own life. What seeds are you nurturing in this season? What is it that you want to remember? What would you say to the person sitting next to you around your own practice with this? So find a couple of people, maybe groups of 3, and just pull your chairs up together and allow each person an opportunity to share briefly for just a couple of minutes. And we'll close with a bit of a guided practice. Body upright, grounded, dignified, breath free as the wind, mind open, spacious as the sky. Sometimes a meanness arises, or grief like a river flowing, or a sense of overwhelm. Each a storm cloud arising with conditions. And when the conditions are no longer present, what's left is the sky, vast, open, clear. Resting in the vast spaciousness of awareness itself, thoughts are just thoughts. Moods are like mists. Sensations are like bubbles. All rise, are known, and disband in awareness. Receiving in awareness, a joy, a sorrow, a grief, all coming and going according to their own nature, and disbanding in awareness. Body like the mountain, breath like the wind, mind like the sky. All like clouds passing through the sky. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for your practice.